Hello and welcome to the Transfer Show, brought to you by IG Trading and Investments, where we debate the latest deals, rumours and transfers going on in this crazy January window. And what a start it has been. Chelsea have fired Enzo Maresca on the 1st of January, and this week Man United followed suit, giving Ruben Amorim the chop. To dissect all the crazy goings on at Old Trafford and what it could mean for their January transfer window, we've got two of the best in the building. We've got the Athletics transfer guru, David Ornstein. Welcome to the show, David.
Good to be back. I was just checking my phone to see if any deals were happening or sackings brewing.
Feel free to do that throughout the show. We'll be waiting with bated breath for any Orn bombs throughout the show. Lyes, Bouzidi, Man United content creator. Dramatic few days for you as well.
I was going to say, no Lyes bombs for me today. No breakthroughs from me, but happy to be here.
It's great to have you both here. And stay tuned towards the end of the show as well. We'll be discussing our smartest investment, brought to you by IG as well. But first, let's get into it. David, Man United, as I mentioned, took the decision to fire Ruben Amorim yesterday morning. What were the key factors in that decision?
Yeah, I think as time is going on, we're learning more about what's really gone on there, because on the surface, it was his post-Leeds United news conference. And I do think that was the straw that broke the camel's back, and it made Monday big, but not entirely surprising in terms of his departure. The seeds were sown really on Friday when he gave that news conference before the Leeds game, where he cut a glum figure. He had a face like thunder. You could see something had happened. He refused for pretty much the first time ever to talk about tactics and formation. He basically said Man United won't be doing any business in the January transfer window. And it now emerges that day he had a row with Jason Wilcox. They fell out, a big disagreement. And it would have been, from what we hear, over a number of topics, whether it be the formation, the system, the transfer market, visions for the club, alleged broken promises and how things had gone so far, plenty more besides. And that essentially made things untenable, because when a relationship breaks down between sporting director and manager or head coach, I'm not sure there's a way back. The more we're learning, the more we find out that sort of cracks were emerging. The team were maybe losing faith in him over these changes of formation and set up from a back three, which he was so proud of, to a back four, but then they returned to a back three, even though they'd been training with a back four. And, you know, some relationships, some dissatisfaction among other areas of the hierarchy, right down from Sir Jim Ratcliffe. The results, the performances have not been great, even though he had them in a good position, I think. 3 points off of fourth place at the time of recording this. And then you scrutinise some of his comments over his time in charge, where he referred to the team as being the worst Man United side in their history, and offering his resignation at various points. When you reflect on that, it's not really the sort of words that would fill Man United's fan base and their hierarchy with confidence. Also sort of picking at some of the younger players and criticising them in the public sphere. But I think when you go at your superiors, like he did it on Sunday, talking about sporting director, director of scouting, when you say that you're the manager, when your title that you agreed to was the head coach, I think then it's game over. And so it proved to be, with the news delivered to him by Omar Barada, the chief executive, Jason Wilcox, the sporting director at Carrington. Of course, there'll be a lot of fallout. There'll be questions about Amorim, questions about those executives, where United go from here, who the next appointment will be. But it's another ended era in the dugout for United. That's 10 since Sir Alex Ferguson retired, including interims since 2013. It feels a mess, but we know in football that things can turn around quite quickly. They've invested heavily, a lot of recruitment, a lot of good players there now. And let's see if the next person in, or the interim, can turn it around.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it did feel like pretty extraordinary statements made in the press. And Lyes, I think it's fair to say the results, even for Man United standards, have been pretty extraordinary under Ruben Amorim. Extraordinarily bad. 15 wins in 47 Premier League games. Yeah. I mean, how do you, as a Man United fan, reflect on Amorim's tenure? And what do you think the sort of end ambition should be for this season? Is it just a write-off now?
I definitely don't think it's a write-off. I mean, the set that you just brought up of the wins, I think, is the most damning thing about all of this, because we can talk till the cows come home about the academy and his treatment of Kobbie Mainoo and his system and his substitution, seemingly always trying to bring on a centre-back for another. There have been a lot of perplexing things about Amorim's tenure at Man United, but I think ultimately none of that would be highlighted as much if he just simply won more games. And I think that's where a lot of the break-off in communication or opinions from Man United fans really comes down to. Everything that we've complained about or the fan base has been broken up about comes down to the fact that he just doesn't win enough. Now, is it a write-off of a season? I don't really think so, because as David just said, we are only 3 points off the top 4. Granted, I remember when Ten Hag was fired a season ago, if at the time I remember, I think we were in the bottom half, but still only a handful of points away from the top 4 at a similar time as well too. So it does really depend on where we go from here. It does sound like it's probably going to be an interim manager, whether that's a Michael Carrick, whether it's an Gunnar Solskjaer, whether Darren Fletcher gets the job longer than the intended one game. But I think there is enough quality in the squad to make something out of the season still. When you look at Chelsea this season, 1 win in 7, I don't look at Chelsea personally and think that they are worlds apart in quality in the squad compared to Man United. Liverpool have a lot more quality, but they are really struggling as well at the moment under Arne Slot. So I look at the Premier League this season and I find the table to be quite volatile. I think there is still an opportunity for Man United to make something out of it. It just depends. Can the next manager come in and profile and platform the players at his disposal better than Amorim was able to? Because one thing about Amorim, whether you liked him or you didn't, I think it's very hard to argue that the system that he continued to persist with didn't really suit any of the players at his disposal. Maybe you could point to young Aiden Heaven, who in a 3 probably was able to adjust into the team a lot better than maybe if he was forced into a 2. Ahmad, I think he found a lot more of a role for him than Ten Hag previously, and that right wing back role really did seem to suit him a little bit. But then I look at Bruno Fernandes playing in a deeper position, and despite getting the numbers that he got, I don't think anyone can argue that Bruno is better higher up the pitch with his creative output. When I look at somebody like Brian Mbeumo, someone who made such a name at Brentford, playing off the last line, getting in behind, scoring goals, we're now asking him to play as a number 10, feeding the ball between the lines, receiving his back to goal. So I'm very interested to see whether it's a short-term manager for the next 6 months or long-term, can someone come in and maybe just give these Man United players more of a chance of performing at their best level? Because honestly, I don't think Ruben Amorim did, and I think the stats show it perfectly.
Well, I think Lyes has set up my next question for you there, David, pretty perfectly. I mean, what information do you have at the moment about Darren Fletcher's potential long-term capabilities of being the permanent manager, and what are you hearing at the moment in terms of the names in the hat to be Man United's next permanent manager?
Well, first we've got to say that Darren Fletcher is extremely highly rated at Manchester United for his playing career, of course, and then his personality, the way he's taken to various roles. He was alongside Erik ten Hag for a bit, and then he slipped back into a youth role more recently. There are some who credit him for tactical approach in the FA Cup final victory over Manchester City under Ten Hag. So there's certainly some pedigree there. There's goodwill for him to do well, and we expect him to get Burnley, maybe Brighton. Let's see after that. It may depend on how he does. In parallel, Manchester United are looking at potential longer-term interim solutions, which sounds a bit convoluted, but you understand the theory because Fletcher's not been in this position before, and there's a huge chunk of the season left to go, and it's Manchester United. There's no European competition, but it probably, not definitely, probably needs somebody that has done it before. And that's why the names such as Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Michael Carrick, maybe a Ruud van Nistelrooy are being looked at because they know the ropes and they know the club, which is crucial.
On an interim to the end of the season, potentially one of those 3
Yeah, that would be the theory. You never know, because we've been in positions before where interims, even Solskjaer himself, have done well and been taken on a permanent basis. I think the mindset of Manchester United is to put a temporary solution in place one way or the other, whether it be Fletcher or somebody else or other people, until the end of the season, and then that will give them some breathing space, everybody a chance to calm down, the team to try and fulfil their aims of finishing in the top 4 places. They can undertake a thorough process. Of course, they've been in this position before in recent years, so they will know a lot of the candidates, much of the work and the data and the interviews even. If you think back to when they spoke to the likes of Marco Silva, Thomas Frank, Thomas Tuchel, Roberto De Zerbi, before ultimately handing Ten Hag his contract renewal, and then when they did sack Ten Hag, it was straight to Ruben Amorim. Their knowledge should be high, and that will put them in a decent position. They will also have some opportunities if they do wait to the summer to look at coaches coming out of contract. So Silva at Fulham, Glasner at Crystal Palace, Iraola at Bournemouth, and then you've got the World Cup. So do they even wait until teams get knocked out or that competition finishes? Because the likes of Tuchel are coaching there, of Mauricio Pochettino, of Carlo Ancelotti, of Julian Nagelsmann. So there are all manner of possibilities. You could say this is a good and exciting opportunity for United. But for the time being, they wanted a steady hand, somebody popular to bring smiles back on faces, bit of unity, return the sort of United to Manchester, and that's going to be Darren Fletcher for what we suspect is a condensed period of time, but you just never know how he'll do. And I think the noises coming from Old Trafford is let's just focus on backing him for now. On the day of recording this, we think that Jason Wilcox, the sporting director, will be beginning the process, starting the conversations about that other interim solution, and let's see where it leaves them. It's an important moment for Wilcox as sporting director. He's still relatively new in this type of role, because he was director of football at Southampton briefly, and at Manchester City it was academy director and academy coach, let alone the magnitude of Manchester United. Similar for Omar Barada, chief executive for the first time, despite having senior roles at Manchester City. Sir Jim Ratcliffe in sporting control of Manchester United. Yes, he had Lausanne and Nice, but never a team of this size. And so a lot of people now need to earn their corn. Christopher Vivell, the director of recruitment. We're in a January transfer window now. They'll have an eye on the summer too. We'll come to speak about that later. People say too many cooks at Manchester United, but they will be comfortable with their structure. But it's time for that structure to deliver.
Absolutely. I mean, having kept Ten Hag on and then firing him in November and then persuading Amorim to take the job in November when he wanted to wait to the end of the season, they've definitely made some decisions that haven't necessarily worked out so far.
The Dan Ashworth situation as well too is one noting as well.
Mention, yeah.
Definitely one to mention. I mean, Lyes, from a Man United fan perspective, I want to list some names at you, and then really we're talking about the permanent successor, I think, really, rather than the interim, who I'm sure you'll be behind any of those Man United legends taking charge. But in terms of a permanent basis, I'm going to list some names at you, and then we'll see what you think. So Enzo Maresca, Glasner, Tuchel, Zerbi, Emery, Solskjaer, Xavi, Pochettino, Honus. Are any of these the sort of names that you would have as your number one choice as Amorim's permanent successor?
I don't know how David feels about this, but I find that the managerial market at the moment is extremely, I don't want to say unconvincing, but there's a lot of question marks around everybody. I don't really think there is one candidate that stands out amongst the rest as, maybe you could say Thomas Tuchel as established, world-class, certified, prestigious manager. A lot of them have shown very good work at certain clubs that they've been at. Maybe they're showing great work at the current club that they're at. But going from that situation to a Goliath of a football club like Manchester United has shown time and time again to be extremely difficult, because when you look at the track record Amorim had at Sporting, or the track record Erik ten Hag had at Ajax even, it's quite clear now that this is a different level of beast. I think personally that Jim Ratcliffe would love to go to the summer and go back to Thomas Tuchel, who I think I remember was actually the guy he went to the first time when he came to the club, but Thomas Tuchel had just left Bayern and said, I'd like to take a break. De Zerbi has always been a name that I've heard floated around. I think his football is really fascinating. I think he played amazing stuff at Brighton, but is that volatile of a personality ever going to work, especially now?
Tuchel times 2 or 3 in terms of volatility.
I think maybe times 4 or 5, especially now working under the constraints of Man United now and this board. And I'd like to ask you this, David, as well, too. In terms of the job title now of head coach under INEOS, is it even realistic that a manager like Thomas Tuchel, who he himself will admit likes to have a lot of control at football clubs he's at, would want to kind of work under the constraints that this new role kind of asks for?
That's becoming the big talking point in football now, this head coach versus manager, and it's so sharp at this present moment because of what's happened with Maresca and Amorim. It would be really interesting to see whether somebody of Tuchel's stature, his personality, we know he carries an aura. I mean, he's more experienced from Chelsea, from Bayern Munich, from PSG, having worked under extremely prominent people in the world, not only in sports.
Dortmund, who was he with? Was it Watzke?
Yeah, and Watzke as well. But look at the guys at the top of those clubs and he's achieved. And then, you know, he'd be working with less experienced people if he came to a club like Manchester United. But maybe a bit too much is made of that. And I don't really like the yes man sort of terminology, which people are sort of throwing at Chelsea with Liam Rosenior, and they're going to throw at Manchester United, no doubt, if they consider again somebody like Kieran McKenna, who they thought really highly of, and he has Man United in him, and he's doing really well in his coaching career. I think it's a simplistic way of looking at it, but of course it's a consideration, because one of the things we seem to be seeing ever more now is these flare-ups in the media. Even Glasner is taking to his news conferences and sort of speaking about transfers and dissatisfaction with the hierarchy. And I think what it accentuates is the need to be absolutely convinced, whether it's head coach or manager, whether it's a big name or a small name, of the bond between sporting director, chief executive, and that head coach manager. So Manchester City are a great example, because they had Pep Guardiola and Cheeky Begirstein. Yeah. I'm not saying it was all swimming behind the scenes there. They would have had many rows, I'm sure, ups and downs around recruitment, around existing players, around targets and philosophies and all that sort of thing. You didn't hear it that much, so credit to City on that. But also, they go so far back.
It's a 20, 30-year-old relationship,
yeah,
of course.
And it's almost like siblings. You do row, but you get on with things and you succeed. Now, that's obviously not easy to replicate elsewhere, but take your time and try and form that in a way. Arsenal have made good progress. Mikel Arteta and Edu, Mikel Arteta and now Andrea Berta. And there are other examples around football. It's not easy. You know, there was situations with Klopp and Michael Edwards before Michael Edwards left that people said, you know, the tension got too much, and then Klopp leaves and those guys come back at Liverpool. Chelsea are now finding with a number of sporting directors, can you really bond with the manager? And they've brought somebody in who was already in their system at Strasbourg, because they know each other. And so I think it's a deeper, more nuanced conversation. And I would love to see how a De Zerbi can get on with his style of football. I'm on the same page as you. There's a reason why somebody like Pep Guardiola speaks so highly of him. And as a purist and a neutral, you are thrilled at the vision of seeing it play out. But I don't have the the sort of challenges to manage. And similarly with Tuchel, there have been names like Gareth Southgate that have always been in and around the Manchester United conversation. I don't see that one happening. But that's an example of a more diplomatic individual, and we've seen how impressive he is on that front. So I think it's an amazing situation, and Manchester United, they've got to get it right.
Under pressure for sure. I mean, before we move on to any potential transfers and news around that in January, just Lyes, so Tuchel's number one, who would be your 2 and 3?
I think Tuchel is the most, he makes the most sense because of his prestige coming to a club like this. He's worked at this level. I'm looking at a few other guys, right? I'd be very interested in Julian Nagelsmann. Now, obviously, similar situation. What does his future look like post-World Cup? But again, worked at Bayern, and although at the time I think maybe people questioned that tenure, I think when you look back at it, with hindsight, that was a Bayern team almost coming to an end of an era, as we saw the following season with Thomas Tuchel. Nagelsmann did win the league. His win percentage rate at Bayern was exceptionally good. He's always been known for playing a very attacking...
worked with him at Hoffenheim.
There you go as well, too. He's always been known for an attacking brand of football. But I think it's more so about looking for a profile rather than looking for a name. I think the name comes after you really identify what it takes to be a Man United manager. And I think there's a few things that most Man United fans would probably be saying from the same hymn sheet when it comes to what we want to see. We want to see someone, a leader, someone who is very good at bringing a group together, someone who's very steadfast in his beliefs, someone who plays some style of attacking football. Now, there's many ways to skin a cat. It could be the Guardiola style, the Arteta style, the De Zerbi style, but someone who just gets Old Trafford back on track, because I think over the last few months, the amount of defenders we're seeing on the pitch, the amount of times that we're sitting on our laurels 1-0 up and bringing on more center backs, that's not something that the crowd wants to see. I think that's important as well too. And as David said as well too, someone who can work hand in hand with a sporting director, because I think for a long time United didn't even have one. We didn't even have someone we could identify with that. But going forward, that is definitely important when you look, like you said about Arteta.
Just a quick point, easier said than done. But what you see with, say, a Guardiola at City, an Arteta at Arsenal, a Klopp previously at Liverpool, and there are other examples around football, Enrique at PSG, somebody that's comfortable in their own skin to come in and do what they do, not try and reinvent the wheel. You know, United didn't play a back three. They've always been back four. They brought in a back three manager, coach, and he was so belligerent in trying to force that through. It didn't work, and there was so much scrutiny over it. Ten Hag, he didn't showcase what we saw of him at Ajax.
Right.
He tried to be something else.
The first 2 games, if you remember, he got destroyed by Brentford and Brighton, and then we never saw his idea really flourish again.
Exactly, and then there's been so much conjecture over the recruitment at Man United this time. They didn't recruit the sort of players that he wanted for his system, but look at the amount they spent, and Man United saying these are players that can adapt to any system. Right. Again, easier said than done, but somebody that is very comfortable, and that's why them giving this time might be very wise, who can speak with them over these months to be absolutely clear on the style of football, the vision, the players that are there now, and the players that they're going to bring in. Because and that identity and the weight of Manchester United, that unique environment. Otherwise, it's going to blow up again.
Yeah.
And ultimately, somebody's going to get this right.
It feels like a bit of the Erik ten Hag situation again, when in terms of when Ole got fired, they had so long to really look for a replacement. They gifted themselves the Ranić interim position, and they gave themselves that much time to eventually find Erik ten Hag. And to be fair to Erik ten Hag, his first season, again, probably ages better and better as we look back on it. Just never ended up transpiring to what we wanted. But I think a big thing for me with where Amorim kind of went wrong and where the next manager can't is, it's okay to be strong in your beliefs about how things should be, but there has to be a little bit of wiggle room. And I think that's the problem with Amorim here. He came in with a back three, which he had historically always played, whether it was at Braga or whether it was at Sporting, but things got so bad and still he refused to. And even in the odd moments where he would change, that first half against Newcastle, the second half he reverted right back to type. I've never heard of a manager that comes in and only plays one formation. Even Guardiola, even Antonio Conte, who probably introduced the three at the back to such a high level over the last 20 years, found himself playing back fours at times. So I think whatever direction they have to go in, like the next manager has to be able to show some kind of flexibility. I'm not trying to say you have to bend over backwards whenever things go wrong, but there has to be you take, I take in this relationship.
Okay, that's the manager covered. Lyes wants Tuchel ideally, but we'll see what happens in the summer and going forward. But let's talk about the January transfer window and the summer transfer window. What's your information, David, about what Amorim's firing means for their January transfer business?
Yeah, I've given my insight on the day we record this in the Athletic deal sheet, and it's that Manchester United's plans for January are unchanged, irrespective of Amorim's departure. That means that they are not planning to do anything meaningful, and they are continuing with what they had set out to do prior to this, which may have been a source of discontent for Amorim. That's because they completed the work that they wanted to do in the summer. And more will follow in the subsequent summer of 2026. January was not earmarked as a market for business. Now, of course, things can change, circumstances, and there are so many factors. So you never say never in football, and the same applies for other clubs. But I would expect it to be quiet. The reason that they went for Antoine Semenyo was they saw it as a market opportunity. They do want to strengthen in that sort of left wing position, because obviously there's an expectation that at some point Marcus Rashford and Jadon Sancho will be departing, and they're not part of things now. And that's where they saw Semenyo playing. They had a historic interest in him last summer. The price was too high then, in their view, £70 million. This time round there was a release clause, £65 million. They were in the mix. Did
that contribute to Amorim's sort of firing in the end? Did that cause friction behind the scenes, the fact they didn't land him?
No, I don't think that they didn't land him. He was enthusiastic about signing him, but perhaps he felt, this is slightly speculative, that if they weren't going to sign him then, let's reallocate that money elsewhere. And that wasn't United's thinking, because it was seen as
sort of a one-off market opportunity.
Exactly, and in the absence of that, they've decided, whether people like it or not, to keep their powder dry and to focus on what you could say are more pressing positions in the summer window, which is the midfield area in particular. And I do think the left wing remains on the agenda. Maybe there'll be a fullback, a left back, or centre half. Let's see where else they go. But that midfield position is going to require heavy investment, whether it be an Elliott Anderson, an Adam Wharton, a Baleba, or anybody else in that bracket. You're looking at, potentially back up to that 100 million bracket, give or take. And that is critical for them. And so rather than rushing in something now, in the absence of Semenyo, they're going to show some patience by the looks of it. And they'll have players coming back from AFCON, they'll have players coming back from injury. They are only competing in domestic competitions. Will players leave? I would say that United's aim of finishing in the top 4 requires everyone they can have at their disposal. And so I'm told no loans for a start, so the likes of Kobbie Mainoo, Joshua Zirkzee. If there is to be a departure, it would have to be permanent. It would have to be an offer that satisfies United financially. And if you look at Mainoo, I think there's a greater chance of him staying now because he was clearly out of favour with Amorim, but he'll have to prove he's worthy of a position in the side when he gets back to fitness. With Zirkzee, there's been some interest from Roma, but he seems to be playing, contributing, scoring a couple of goals, and he's said to be a popular character in the dressing room as well. So let's see. A lot can happen before the market closes, but I don't expect them to be one of the most active clubs in or out of Old Trafford.
Okay. I mean, Lyes, I think I've worked with you for a number of years now, and I think Man United's midfield has been pretty much the top of the agenda every time we have worked with you. But here we are, January 2026. I'm asking you again, of the names kind of in the frame, loosely in the frame, your Whartons, Andersons, Balebas, even like a João Gomez potentially, maybe a cheaper option like a Conor Gallagher this month, potentially available on loan, who knows. If you had any option to sort out Man United's midfield this January, who do you think Man United would ideally want to go for?
I don't think there's even any point in talking about Baleba, Wharton, or Anderson. Those are very clearly summer targets, and it's probably why INEOS would have told Amorim, we are not going to do anything here, and an opportunity like Semenyo exists, but we can't just push forward a Baleba kind of deal. Like, I think, in fact, there were talks that it might have been something that got highlighted, and Brighton said we're not looking to sell him.
Yeah, Brighton's chairman Paul Barber.
Yeah, we're not looking to sell him. It makes sense, right? Those kinds of players, will, especially when there's a World Cup coming up for the likes of Wharton and Anderson, and that price probably doubles or whatever. I'm looking at opportunities this January, if they even exist. For me, someone that I think Man United could maybe do a little worse with is Ruben Neves. Why not? I mean, Ruben Neves is someone who I think his contract expires towards the summer. There has been talk that he wants to return to Europe ahead of the World Cup. I think he's still 27 years old, still has a lot to offer. When you're looking at maybe not now under Amorim, but what Amorim was looking for really was someone with range on his passing. That's always been a strength of Ruben Neves, has goals to his game, gives you a bit of grit, a bit of leadership, and I think it gives you another body in there because we've seen in this period, maybe highlighted even more because we were only playing 2, but when Bruno got out of the team, when Kobbie wasn't available, we're left with Ugarte and Casemiro, who historically can't finish 60 minutes at the club anymore. So I think Ruben Neves could be a shrewd signing. Now people will look at the age and say, is that who Man United should be going for? But I think just to kind of fill out the engine room, to give us the next 6 months until we can then go for our first choice, I think we could do a lot worse than that.
Absolutely. I think Elliott Anderson will probably be top of a lot of clubs' wish list this
doubt.
summer for sure. I mean, Man City rumoured to be interested in him as well.
But here's the thing with a lot of these players, right? Like, Man United can speak all they want about how those are their main targets, but like you said, don't you think they're also Man City's main targets and Liverpool? So how do you then go to the summer without European football and ask these players to join you over a City? We end up with a Semenyo situation where you got Pep on one phone and Amorim on the other. It's a straightforward decision. So I think Man United need to focus on getting to the summer in the healthiest way possible. If a Ruben Neves can come in for the short term just to get you to the long term, I think that's the optimal decision.
Yeah, I also think someone like Conor Gallagher, if it could be done on a 6-month deal, maybe he'll think he can get himself into England reckoning, not playing all that much at Atletico Madrid. People forget how amazing he was in his final year at Chelsea. He kept Enzo Fernandes out of that side under Pochettino. There was goals, there was assists.
I think the only thing I would say about Conor Gallagher in respect to Man United's midfield is I think there is a severe lack of ball-playing midfielders at Man United, right? In terms of the stats speak for itself. Man United perform better when they have less of the ball than more. I think that's something they need to rectify rather than bringing in a Gallagher who is fantastic in many ways, but maybe being a bit of a metronome in midfield isn't one of his biggest strengths.
Sure, maybe more suited to that sort of shuttler role under Amorim, let's say.
Yeah.
I mean, David, there has been speculation that Man United are sort of keeping aware of forward options as well, obviously Semenyo, but there's been loose links with Jean-Philippe Mateta. I think Yan Diomande is a player that a lot of Premier League clubs seem to be interested in. Do you think Man United could make a move for a forward this month?
I've always been intrigued by the Mateta Man United possibility, just because he's delivered so well for Crystal Palace and Man United. I've always felt they have succeeded with older strikers, mature historically. So I don't know whether it be a Van Persie, Sheringham, Van Nistelrooy,
Ibrahimovic
Henrik
didn't
Larsson,
do too bad, huh?
Ibrahimovic
Yeah.
did okay. And the younger ones have struggled a bit more. And then you've got Mateta banging them in at Selhurst Park. He's not been so prolific of late. He's also missing a lot of opportunities. And sadly for us of those who had this halcyon vision of JP kicking the corner flag at Old Trafford, I think
The
that
shirt
ship,
tucked in, yeah.
the shirt tucked in, I think that ship might have sailed. I think Diomande is being looked at by many clubs, not expecting a move in the January window, but he does seem to have Premier League potential at some point. Look, United have done so much work to that front line. They've got to back Sesko, he came in at great expense and has vast potential. Cunha's already showing his qualities in the Premier League for Wolves, for Man United, international too. You've got Brian Mbemo, who I'm a great fan of, Brentford, Man United, Cameroon, and they'll feel that was pretty good value for money. Let's see what happens with Bruno Fernandes. You've got Mason Mount in that mix. If he can stay fit, we know he can contribute. Intrigued by, in the absence of Semenyo, what they do going forward, so i.e. summer onwards, on that left wing position. That's really intriguing. But I don't have concrete names at the moment, and I don't think that is the first priority for Man United, given the midfield necessity.
Okay, let's see what happens in that midfield towards the end of the window. Okay, guys, to wrap up the show, we are going to do this week's Smartest Investment, brought to you by IG. So this is an intelligent piece of business that's already completed or that's rumoured at the moment. Lyes, I'll go to you first. Your favourite completed business or rumour?
I think Brendan Johnson has a lot of potential to do well at Crystal Palace. I think at Spurs, maybe it just got to a point where there's so many wide players and they are looking to go a different direction. But I look at maybe the more transitional game at Crystal Palace in one of those front three positions. He has shown he's got an eye for a goal. That could be potentially really good business for Crystal Palace. Let's see with Semenyo though. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure about that one. I think he's a fantastic player, but City got a lot of attacking options. We know Pep has always liked to have an array of different attackers to go to. But I'm interested to see where he fits in. I think if he can get to the level that we saw at Bournemouth and even elevate himself under Guardiola, that could be a signing we look at in a few years and think, wow, like they did really, really well to get him at that price. But we'll see, man.
I like it. Okay, David, anything from you?
It doesn't have to be a completed deal.
No.
Then...
Oh, that changes things.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to go for the possibility of a Mark Gahey move. Because you'll have seen in recent days Manchester City intensifying their interest given the injuries to Gvardiol and Ruben Diaz. And I'm intrigued to see if they push further. And by that I mean an offer to Crystal Palace, an offer to Mark Gahey, because they would have big decisions to make then. Do Palace cash in with 6 months to go? Does Gahey decide to take the move when he's 6 months from free agency and having his pick of clubs, including Manchester City, but then you add back in Liverpool and Bayern Munich, who probably wouldn't be there now, and many other clubs. Do they stick to their sort of mutual understanding that they were going to see out the final months and part as free agents and try their best to lift another trophy, compete in Europe? But if Man City, or anybody else, but it seems Man City are the most to the fore right now, were able to get Gahey for a reasonable price, then you've got a 25-year-old, brilliant Premier League ready centre-half, one of the very best, brilliant international England starter who's going to go to the World Cup this summer and show his qualities, fitness permitting, in a way that he did at the Euros. And I just think whoever gets Mark Gahey next, and it's why so many big clubs are interested in him, whether it be free next summer or for a reduced fee in January, they're getting one of the best players and characters around. So I'm going to say Mark Gahey.
I like it. Is there an understanding that maybe a £35 million or £40 million would tempt Crystal Palace, or do you think it's still very much their desire to kind of keep him?
That was the sort of bracket in the summer, and it didn't happen at the last minute. Palace pulled the plug on it, and people are saying Liverpool should have gone earlier and a bit higher and whatever. That's water under the bridge now. There will be a price that Steve Parish will sell for, I'm sure, because every player has their price. There's a deal to be done. But City are canny operators. How desperate are they to pay such significant funds? How easy is it for them to do so in the middle of the season with PSR, profitability and sustainability, the Premier League's financial rules? They spent heavily last January. They spent heavily in the summer. They're going to have to fund a significant salary if they bring him in as well. And they'll obviously Gvardiol is a serious tibia fracture, But Diaz, we're yet to hear the prognosis. If that is not so bad, then they'll get him back soon. They've brought Elaine, the young player, back from Watford on loan, and they do have resources. How desperately do they feel they need to recruit again to try and push with Arsenal for Premier League title, to push in the Champions League? Pep Guardiola seems hungry for trophies again. It's a fascinating one. I would say there's no guarantee of it. I think right now, famous last words, but Mark Gay is probably more likely to wait for the free agency and stick to what he had agreed with Palace, that they'll part ways in the summer. But I don't think we've heard the last of this yet.
Well, I think it's an excellent choice, David, because it involves Man City. Arsenal fans will be watching that with interest. Liverpool fans will be watching that with interest.
On the title, yeah.
Absolutely. And yeah, I'll just wrap up with my one. As a bald man with glasses, I've gone for the hipster choice. I'm suiting the image. Amadou Haidara has joined Lens for £2.6 million. Wow. This is a Malian midfielder with 8 years experience at RB Leipzig. He helped them qualify for the Champions League 5 times. He won the DFB Pokal twice. There has been a few more injury issues in the last couple of years. But £2.6 million, I can't remember the last time I've seen a player of that calibre, when he is fully fit, with that level of experience, transfer for so little money as well. I think he could make a massive difference to a Lens side that are still top of Ligue 1.
I think they're what, 11 unbeaten or something right now. They're on a crazy
run
of form.
They're 1 point ahead of PSG. And
really
whilst
well.
most people do expect PSG to kind of recover their season as it continues and get more players back from injury, an amazing move to kick off the window for a side that are having a phenomenal season. So
you know who's actually kick-starting that Lens team right now?
Who's that?
Odson Edouard and Florian Thauvin.
There we have
They're
it.
doing quite well in Ligue 1 right now.
Yeah. It's great to see. I mean, Thauvin's making a push for the World Cup.
This is an ultimate money ball.
Yeah.
Liga.
Amazing. Yeah, fantastic.
Premier League clubs watching.
Haidara was being linked with Premier League moves.
Every summer with Man United.
We're rebuffing like huge reported interest.
Yeah.
That's a bargain.
I couldn't believe it when I saw it yesterday. But guys, thank you so much for watching this week's transfer show, brought to you by IG Trading and Investments. We'll be back every week throughout the January window, so stay tuned for more madness and more analysis as the window continues. Big thanks to Lyes, big thanks to David, and we'll catch you next week.